Hello, friends. This is Wonderful Morrison, and you're listening to the Evolution of the Fempreneur podcast, the show where we dive deep into the world of fierce, fabulous women over 40. That's right, ladies. We are the heartbeat of our society, rocking it in every aspect of life. Whether we're moms or not, grandmas, CEOs, or interns, we're making waves and leaving our mark. We're not just beautiful and sexy, we're smart, funny, and full of wisdom. So join us as we celebrate the strength, resilience, and unstoppable spirit of women over 40, because we are owning our lives and demanding the respect we deserve. Hello, friends. This is Wonderful Morrison, and you're listening to the Evolution of the Fempreneur podcast, the show where we dive deep into the world of fierce, fabulous women over 40. These ladies are the heartbeat of our society, rocking it in every aspect of their lives. Whether they're moms or not, grandmas, CEOs, or interns, they're making waves and leaving their mark. They're not just beautiful and sexy. These women are smart, funny, and full of wisdom. Join us as we celebrate the strength, resilience, and unstoppable spirit of women over 40 who are owning their lives and demanding the respect they deserve. And today we're going to be talking about getting to the heart of who we are and what we are meant for, with our guest, Michelle Heffron, who is a certified life coach through the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching and as a divorce coach to the International Association of Professions Career College. She offers life strategies as a life coach, relationship coach, and divorce coach. Here's a little insight of who Michelle is and what has led her on the path to helping other women have more joy, more happiness, more love, and more of what we are truly meant for. This is what she wrote. What seems like another lifetime ago, life as I knew it came crashing down on me, and I found myself in a state of complete madness. Who knows about that? It felt like I'd hit rock bottom. I felt hopeless, scared, and bewildered by my situation. But today, my life looks completely different. I got some help, and through my own journey of personal development, I discovered I truly do have everything it takes to create my dream life, complete with a career I love, friendships I cherish, and relationships founded in authenticity and love. Wow. So happy to have you with us, Michelle. And I mean, that little bit of peering into your life, that's what we really want to share with our audience today, because you're an incredibly fascinating human being with many phases of your levels of success. So please share with us who you are, what you do, and also the journey that it's taking you to be here today as a relationship, divorce, and life coach, which is a fascinating little ball of goodness.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I kind of get teary listening to that intro. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I'll speak really quickly to that trio. You know, when you come through any life transition, you know, whether it's the bigness of a divorce or, you know, maybe losing a loved one or becoming an empty nester or, you know, being so stuck in a job that you don't really love and truly thrive in and trying to figure out what to do next. I think all of those things all factor into life and finding, you know, who you are and really what you're meant for, because until we really get to our own hearts, give ourselves that permission to thrive in life,
Yes.
it's really, really, really difficult to see beyond the veil of illusion that our beliefs have kind of put in place for us. And
Right.
so that's sort of why I put the three of them together. I do say I coach a lot of women in particular, but I also can coach men sometimes. through divorce, but it's really because it's two-sided. There's two components to divorce. There's really that practical business side, and then there's that emotional roller coaster side. And if you can't get your emotions into a place of being able to move through it in some sort of a stable way, then decision making becomes stuck or very, very difficult. And I always say you should never make a major decision when you're emotionally not in a place of being able to get to your heart. I also always say that, your mind or your brain thinks, but your heart knows. And so it requires being really, really quiet.
Wow. That is such a nugget of advice and I like how you keep bringing it back to the heart space. So, we have some audience members that are not over 40 and they are listening. And I'm wondering what that journey meant for you. You said two words that really stuck out to me: permission and the heart.
Yeah.
So when did you really see that permission and heart met in your life journey?
That's such a great question, because I think that was dropped on me a few times throughout my life, but I didn't always choose to listen. So, for an example, it wasn't until I was about 50 years old. Now, I'm way over 40 now. I'm into my 60s.
And looking fabulous, by
Thank
the
you
way.
very. I think so, and I'm very proud of that. And I remember when I was I don't know if you remember, when you go to college, they often have you take this kind of personality test, and they tell you what you would really be good at. And, at that time in my life, I wanted to rule the world. I was going to be like some big deal. And they said, oh, you'd be a really good psychologist. We think you should go in psychology. And I'm like, I don't think so. Are you crazy? I mean, because my belief system around what that meant looked like somebody who wore bad shoes and
didn't have the hint of boring life, right? Kind of.
That wasn't the persona that I saw myself as. So I marched through life doing a lot of things that didn't bring me joy. And it wasn't until, and I went through a divorce when I was pretty young. I was in my very early 30s, and I had a little girl. And at the time, I had a really good career in advertising, and I was in survival mode. And what I loved most about my job was I was in the advertising side of it, and I talked to people. One day, my daughter and I, it was bring your daughter to work day, and I brought her to work, and she was like, 5 years old or 6 years old or some crazy. No, maybe she was a little older. And she said, oh my gosh, Mom, you have the best job in the world. You just walk around and talk to people all day.
Oh, the things that come out of the mouth of babes, right?
It's just so funny. Well, fast forward a few years, I was a single mom, and then I got remarried. And everything was going really well. And then I had my son, so he's about 10 years older or younger than my daughter. And I really had always wanted to find out what it was going to be like a stay-at-home mom, like have friends who weren't rushing, to work every morning and things like that. So when that happened, my life, as I knew it, started to sort of crumble before my very eyes, because I started feeling like the hired help. And in that time, I was dabbling in trying to open little small businesses with jewelry and different things like this. But I got very involved with my kids' school. And then I was running auctions, and all of a sudden I was getting sponsorships, and then I was learning software programs, and then I was getting referred to outside nonprofit organizations who needed help with fundraising and things like that. And it just happened to be a really a place. I mean, for me to be able to just talk to people and share them the impact of the work and, blah, 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 blah. And then I could raise
whatever you were fundraising for.
Yeah. It didn't really matter what it was at the time. I mean, of course, I was passionate about my kids' schools and stuff like that. Well, fast forward a little bit longer, I realized that the relationship I was in with my former husband was becoming very emotionally and financially abusive. Now, I didn't use that term back then because I didn't know what it was. I just knew that something wasn't right, and everyone around me, especially my parents, could see that this wasn't a good thing. So I ended up completing that marriage, but it was not in a very graceful way. I left in the middle of the day. Friends and my parents and people were there to help me move. I don't know why I still get a little emotional about that. And I took just my clothes and the things I needed. My son, my daughter was in college at the time, and moved into this little cottage and started over. And so I had no idea what I was going to do. Wonderful. I mean, I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money, so to speak. I got a monthly stipend from him at the beginning, but I came to understand that I had been taken off of all of our accounts. And that I really didn't have a bank account or a credit card in my name or any of these things. And I didn't know what I was going to do. But I decided that I wasn't going to flounder out there. I was going to figure it out.
As we do as women, I think your story resonates so powerfully because I think that level of internal permission,
yes,
that level of internal kind of like that little spark of love,
yes,
just really got you to like, you know what? It's a small cottage today. It'll be a house tomorrow.
And that's how I always looked at it. I thought this is only temporary. So before I knew it, I got a job, at a very big job, and I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't qualified for it, but I got the job anyway. And before I knew it, I was traveling up and down the coast as the corporate communications director for this large company. I'm like, all right, I'll take that. Well, it became very hard at the time. And as the universe will have it, sometimes things open up, and I was part of a big layoff about a year or so into the whole thing. And I thought, all right, so I started a consulting company, and then I started working with some different clients, and before I knew it, I was working with nonprofit organizations again, and I was consulting with them, and then I became an executive director for one of them, and traveling with them again. And they happened to be an NFL family. And so that put me into a whole different world. And then I got hired by another larger nonprofit organization to run a massive capital campaign that was, like, I don't know, $24 million or something. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what a capital campaign is, but sure, I can do this. And so, but it was during that time when those jobs were happening, I had also hired my first coach. I really didn't know what a life coach was, but I remember distinctly the first day I worked with her, and she was marvelous. We're still quite good friends. And I remember sitting there going, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. That was kind of my getting to the heart moment. And I thought, okay. And then I had to remind myself, okay, am I just saying this because I want more out of life? Or is this really what I'm supposed to be? I mean, then I questioned.
Interesting question though, right? That's an interesting question because you were really in the hub of life already. You've already kind of solidified your strength by walking away from a marriage that wasn't serving anyone and then continuing to grow in these kind of large spaces. But it's interesting because I think most women think it's the other way around. It's when it's the darkest we ask these questions of like, oh, what do we do now? But that's not really true. I think as we evolve, we ask those questions when we're at the highest level of our spaces of like, what do we do now? Is this really us? Is this what we want to do? So then how did that evolve into being where you are today?
And that's a really good point you make, because when the spirit moves you to ask those questions, that's the time you're meant to. So listen to that. So I do talk to my clients a lot about being very, very quiet. And I mean, like, sit down, turn off the music, and shut up and listen. I do. I said, you've got to be quiet if you want your questions answered. And anyway, so I went, took me a few more years, but I kept getting signals that there was a coaching program to go through because I was afraid. There's where my fears started to come in. That how could I really do that? By this time, my son was in high school. I was planning for college, barely in high school, I should say. But still, and I thought, I can't just start my own coaching business and not have this steady paycheck, because that's how we typically think, right? I mean, I've got insurance, I've got this.
Survival.
I was still totally in survival. And it took me, it's evolved over time, just like so many of us who are really dedicated to evolving and growing in our lives, is that, layer by layer by layer, these things started to reveal themselves. And I looked into this coaching program that a friend of mine had gone to, and it was major. It was like getting a master's degree. It wasn't like, take this course over
like 6 weeks or
certification. It was like a year-long commitment, and I looked at that, and it was at the time for me it was very expensive, and I thought, well, I just guess this isn't the right time. So I unsubscribed from their site. Well, before I knew it, all of a sudden, this one year when I was in particular I guess, need of wanting something more in my life, all of a sudden these emails started coming into my box again. And now I know these are signs, and we should not ignore these things. We should pay attention to them. So I clicked on it. And at that time, it was the beginning of COVID. I had to close my office. I was huge. I had a huge executive director role by this time for a national organization. And they happened to educate young people about the difference between what's healthy and unhealthy in your relationships. So and previous to that, I had worked with some domestic violence prevention support organizations and things. So I started putting all the pieces together. That's what brought me back to, I was in this emotionally and financially abusive marriage, and that's where that word kind of came from. But then at the same time, I knew I was going to end up having to close my office. My staff at that time was going to have to work remotely. And we were doing a lot of remote work anyway, because I was located in Seattle or Bellevue, and our headquarters were in New York. So we were already on Zoom all the time. So I had a pretty good understanding of how it all worked. Anyway, this thing came into my inbox, and I remember going, you know what, this must be the time. So there was this deal that, the fast action, if you buy before New Year's midnight or whatever, then you start the program and blah, 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 blah. So I did it, and it was a bigger program than I ever thought, but it was really that thing that made me go, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It took a little while longer for everything else to open up and be available for me to step out of my role as a full-time executive and start a business. And, as a business owner, there's a lot that goes into that. But
Right.
it's like every time I work with somebody, I get so much joy out of it and seeing people evolve. No one doesn't grow through this process. And I grow
Right.
as much as my clients grow. And so everything is like this double blessing, if you will, in my world, I feel like. And now I know too that when something isn't working out for me, it means, you know, further investigation is
Mm,
needed. And
right.
maybe it's not where I'm supposed to go. Is it that message? So it's really not about making decisions from my head or my brain. It's really always getting back to what's my heart telling me to do here.
Wow. And I think that's the key to, why I thought, gosh, this message is going to be a lot about getting to the heart of who we are. It's all over all of your marketing material, right? Everywhere I looked, I was like, oh gosh, okay, getting to the heart of whatever it is. And I realized that that's the evolution of, I don't know what it is to be a man, so I'm not going to even pretend to be like, that's the human thing. But for women, for sure, right? That's, I think, where we have a lot of conflict is when our head is saying something, but our heart really wants something. And so we're trying to reason out all of the things. And I think what I love about your story is that intuitiously, you always knew, you always kind of had this way of understanding that even when your head was trying to tell you, no, 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 this, but your patience allowed you to see, okay, it's been a couple more years. Because I think sometimes we get so excited and, oh, it's a message. I'm going to get on it right now. But
Yeah.
I like how you're very thoughtful in the process of like, let's think it through, let's process it. But you also didn't wait so long. You have any regrets, but you also didn't do it so soon that it's a different level of regrets, right? I think so the heart really does know tiny.
Oh,
So with
1,000%.
that being said, so you really are the conduit for this heart space. And especially in the work that you do, and especially as a divorce coach, right? Because that's your heart is so muddled in that
Oh,
space.
it's painfully muddled.
So what would be your top three go-to nuggets that when somebody is needing to make a decision moving forward and they can't get it together in terms of like their head and their heart, like how do you know it's your heart and how do you know it's your head, like how do you know that? What
Yeah.
would be some of the keys to that?
Well, that's a really good question. I think for me, I would say one nugget is giving yourself that space and time to listen because, like I was talking to one woman one time and I just shared that, when you know, you know. If you're confused and you don't know what to do, you actually really do. What happens is that oftentimes we don't like the answer that is coming to us. So we
Oh,
keep
that's good.
asking the same question and we still get the same answer. And that means something, right?
Hmm.
So there's that. Um, I also, and it really does get back to this getting to the heart, like, okay, if you're in this situation right here, right now, why? You know,
Mm. Oh, that's good.
I mean, why are you? Because I'm very big, and it took me a long time to get this for myself. Trust me, is taking personal responsibility for where we are in our lives and how
Hmm.
we create our lives day in and day out. And, I certainly don't always get it right a lot of the time, but it is one of those things. It's like, what's keeping me here? Why am I doing this? what role am I playing in this relationship, for instance, that allows this to happen? And it's
Right.
really asking some very fundamental heart-centered questions. And as women in particular, we have a very hard time kind of tapping into what that's that feminine energy. And it's not a
Hmm.
gender thing because both genders have both masculine and feminine energy. I mean,
Right.
we as business people, we do spreadsheets and there's financial agreements and things like that that have to be done, right? But
Yeah.
if we're always trying to come at everything from a male energetic space, then we're
Mhm.
missing what our hearts are telling us. And the heart space comes from your feminine energy.
Mm.
Being able to pull both and balance your feminine and masculine energy. I mean, as a business owner, I have to do some of these things that require business type things, but I no longer come at everything from my business as I would have when I was an executive and running everything from a head
Headspace.
space rather than a heart space. And it's being able to tap into your heart space. And that's not how we've been conditioned in our lives. And it's a
Right.
huge shift in mind and thought patterns and where you are with things. And just to be able to give yourself that grace through that period. And I often call it like, it's like when you were saying, you waited till it was the timing's right. It's sort of like waiting for the blossom to open. You can't
Yes.
pry the blossom open. You've got to wait till everything within it is ready to all come out
Right.
at the same time. And that's what that getting to the heart moment is for me.
That's such a beautiful analogy and explanation because it's so true. I'll never forget my wedding day. We had the flowers were like opening the night before, and oh, my mother was losing it. She's like, "Oh my gosh, it's not gonna be," and they are these giant lilies, and she had this whole idea of, and I remember thinking like, what? There's nothing you can do until there's really nothing you can do unless it's ready to open. And it just so happened because the wedding was later on the next day that by the time we got to the actual moment, it had opened. Like a few of them had opened enough where it filled in the whole thing. But that's so, I think we get, for me personally too, we get so emotionally involved that we're trying to either prove a point, right? Subconsciously, like, oh, if I make this decision now, it's going to be awesome.
Mhm.
Or we're doing it based on fear, which then really doesn't get to the heart space, this is what I love about what you do. And this is why I had to have you on as an interview because I think divorce is something there's not anybody who has not been touched by divorce of some kind,
Mhm.
but we still kind of never talk about it. It's still very taboo. It's still this kind of language of like, oh, not me. Or, oh, kind of like this whole distant arm's length, like type of conversation. And I think when you talk so highly about this heart space and then you're talking about divorce too, I mean, how you got there is always about the heart, married or not, right? So I think that's a beautiful space for the conversations to be had is the things that we think we know a lot about because it's been said over and over again, and there's divorce court on TV, but really we don't talk about it from the space that really matters, which is the
That's
heart
such a
always.
wonderful way, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful way to describe it because part of I see my job is helping people dismantle what's been taught to them about
Mm,
the whole thing. I
yeah.
I believe so strongly that the way we've been doing divorce um, can be done differently, and I really
Yeah.
believe that we can get through this whether one party or both. Everybody's
Yeah.
got a hand in the game, but you can only do what you can do. But I believe that you can do this with more dignity, grace, and
Mm,
love
I
because
agree.
having to pick up all your pieces and throw them into some bag at the end of this thing when you're all scathed and beaten up
Yeah.
isn't starting a new life. It's dragging your old life along with you. And if we can start that process while you're going through the whole thing and help you see the beauty in what's happening for you, and that this could be an opportunity for some real freedom and a different place when you get to the final part of it, and maybe get you there faster because you can take your emotions and put your energy into things that will expedite the process, because it's your life. You get one life. And so why not take this as it is? It's not going to change. What's done is done. And I'm not an advocate for divorce at all. If there's some way of repairing things, I'm all for that. But if you're to that point, you know it's there, why dwell in the past? Let's move on with things, and let's give ourselves that permission to be who we're meant to be, and not think we have to drag all the broken crap along with us.
And, I love that you say that you're not an advocate for divorce also, because I think that's another thing when we assume that somebody is talking about that arena, is that they're like, oh yeah, let's have a party. Because there's different situations for different people. But I was looking at one of your quotes in your, and I wanted to kind of lead into that as we end this podcast interview. Is Marcus Aurelius said, "Look within. Inside is the solid foundation of good, and it will ever bubble up if ever you will dig." And I feel like that sums up who you are as a coach for the people who are going through this particular tough journey of divorce on both sides. And whether it's meant to or not meant to, or whatever it's supposed to look, nobody can put any stamp on what divorce is, because every single one is different. And I think that your language of the heart space is something that needs to be consistently brought in the conversation of divorce, because it's not just about the kids, or it's not just about the this or the that. It's really just about the human being, and love is our greatest force. And sometimes when that isn't there anymore, or it's broken, or it's singed, whatever it is, can't do it alone. So we need to do it with other people who have that experience. So I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for all your golden nuggets. I feel like I could talk to you for 8 more hours about this, because you have such wisdom when it comes to really this heart space thing is just such a great alignment to a broken heart, that, or a hurting heart, or a pained heart, that but the heart still is at the core of the conversation. And we'll have to do this again for sure at another time. But and so what we'll do, audience, is that we will have all of Michelle's information in our podcast, so you can reach out, have a conversation with her, and really see if anybody you know, or if you're going through an experience that really feel this is speaking to you. I highly recommend you speak to the woman who knows much more about the heart space and divorce, and also life in general, and as we are where we're at. And again, until next time, thank you so much. This is Wonderful Morrison with the Fempreneur podcast. Until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel with the same name, The Evolution of the Fempreneur.
and never miss out on valuable insights. Be sure to connect with us on our social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook under Wonderful Morrison. Until next time, Fempreneur sisters, I'll keep making the invisible visible, and let's continue celebrating our strength, resilience, and unstoppable fierce spirit together.